Discover the incredible love story of a paralyzed millionaire, humiliated on a blind date with a waitress who sees beyond the glimmer of his fortune. Ethan Masters sat rigid in his wheelchair, a pristine suit tailored to fit impeccably, yet it felt like a costume that accentuated his paralysis rather than hid it. He was now a paralyzed billionaire at 34, once the king of Silicon Valley, and yet reduced to someone who felt invisible behind 8 figures of wealth. Despite the ongoing hum of the high-end restaurant around him, the laughter, the clinking glasses, his mind raced, drowning in a mix of anxiety and indignation. How had he let himself be talked into a blind date, a pathetic stab at normalcy under the watchful eyes of society? The world felt as if it were laughing at him. His date, Samantha, a young woman with ideas as grand as the city skyline, but who knew him only through the lens of his fortune, spoke animatedly about tech advancements that didn't particularly interest him. It was a grim reminder that wealth could attract attention, but not the right kind. What was she really seeing? He wasn't just a millionaire. He was a man seething with fear and a longing for authenticity. "So, do you ever miss your old life?" she asked, the question prompting a painful twinge in his chest. If only she understood the depths of his losses, the camaraderie of brainstorming nights, the thrill of the pitch meetings. "All the time," he paused. "I mean, it's hard not to." The laughter surrounding them felt like an echo of mockery, each note creeping under his skin. As he engaged in her conversation, Ethan enacted a role, hoping he could pull off the charming billionaire facade, until the hushed whispers erupted from a nearby table. "What a waste," someone chuckled, dangerously audible. "He can't even walk. What good is that kind of money?" It was a gut punch, sending hot waves of humiliation surging through him. He hesitated, his palms sweating on his wheelchair's arms. Did they think he was less worthy of love because of his condition? Before he could formulate a response, a server passed, and Ethan's attention snapped to Mia, an upbeat waitress with an infectious grin. Despite the stinging remarks, she handled clumsily spilled water with grace, her energy radiating in stark contrast to the judgmental atmosphere. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment he was seen not as a withered version of himself but as a man. She smiled, a bright light slicing through his darkness. Unlike Samantha, she seemed unfazed by his wealth, instinctively treating him with dignity, as if his character mattered. Suddenly, before he could breathe, he was back in the moment, enveloped by the sneers around him. The laughter faded, replaced by palpable tension. Mia, conversing with him through shared glances, began to retreat, tending to other tables, while the weight of the judgment clawed at his self-worth. He felt panic rising, anxiety gripping him tightly like chains he could not break. Could he ever escape the disdainful eyes of society? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ethan's struggle became an anchor, tethering him deep within his insecurities. Had he somehow invited this disdain by allowing himself to be vulnerable? All around him, he felt the surface quirks of affluence mocking him, but Mia's earnestness countered that clamor. In the silence that followed, he questioned if even a woman like Mia could love someone steeped in such visible wounds. The shadows of doubt enveloped him, solidifying a sense of isolation he had tried so hard to escape. As he gazed through the dimly lit room, a question echoed louder than the judgments. Would he ever be seen for more than just a paralyzed millionaire? Or was his chance at genuine connection slipping through his fingers like sand? Ethan blinked hard, trying to shake off the mood that hung over him like a storm cloud. The sight of Mia moving gracefully between tables was captivating, grounding him in a way that the empty words of Samantha never could. In her presence, he felt an urge to break free from the stereotype of the broken millionaire and instead display the man he once was, But how could he reclaim his identity when insecurities looped like a broken record in his mind? "Excuse me for a moment," he said, as he focused on the nearest exit, ignoring the shuffling of Samantha's chair in protest. As he maneuvered his wheelchair through the crowded space, every roll felt like a declaration of war against his own self-pity. His goal wasn't just to escape the judgmental whispers. He wanted to seek the authenticity that Mia represented. When he reached the bar area, the dim lighting offered a momentary shield from the invasive stares. He could still hear the laughter mix with clattering utensils, but now it was just background noise, a reminder that the world kept moving while he struggled to find his footing. Though he was surrounded by opulence, Ethan felt insignificant. Even marred by doubt, the thought of chasing his true self was exhilarating. "Hey, are you all right?" came a voice that snapped him from his interior spiral. It was Mia. She had followed him, a concerned expression on her face, no trace of condescension or pity. Instead, her empathy enveloped him like a warm blanket. It struck him. Here was someone who seemed to really care, not about his money or his accomplishments, but about his well-being. "Yeah, just needed a break," he muttered, lame as it sounded. Yet he sensed a truth behind his words. Mia leaned against the polished bar, her arms crossed casually. "People can be awful, can't they?" She gestured briefly to the dining patrons before her expression softened. "But that doesn't define you. You know that, right?" Could she really see what lay beneath the surface? "It's hard not to let it," Ethan confessed, lowering his voice. Vulnerability seemed a risk, yet in her presence it felt somewhat safer. "I thought success meant freedom, but it only seems to come with more expectations and judgments." She nodded thoughtfully, as if processing his admission injected wisdom from her experiences. "Your worth isn't tied to what others think or even how they perceive your challenges. It's who you are inside that matters most. You have a choice to define that yourself." Ethan felt a flicker of hope mingling with his skepticism, an unfamiliar sensation that offered a slight but powerful push against his inertia. Could he dare to reclaim the narrative that he could own, despite the burdens he carried? Perhaps this was the fire he needed to reshape his life and rediscover the potential within. He wanted to ask her so much, but a sudden rush of self-doubt gripped him again. Was it possible to build a genuine connection, even a friendship, with someone like Mia? The question simmered just below the surface. Though he hesitated, the impulse to know her better was undeniable. "Do you have a moment?" Ethan ventured, resolute to connect more deeply with her bright spirit. "Could you join me outside for a few minutes?" Before she could respond, a commotion erupted nearby, a group of patrons raising their glasses in celebration. The noise clamored around them, reminding Ethan how easily he could be overshadowed, but he was determined not to let that moment slip away. "Let's step outside," Mia replied, her smile unwavering. "I'd love to." As they moved toward the entrance, the air shifted. Ethan was acutely aware that his journey toward self-acceptance and new beginnings hinged on this very moment. What awaited him beyond these walls? A discovery, a connection, or perhaps the courage to truly embrace vulnerability? With every challenge came an opportunity for transformation, and now it felt like he was on the brink of something profound. Yet doubts flickered at the edges of his mind, whispering about the looming reactions of others if he let Mia into his world more thoroughly. What was he willing to risk for the prospect of genuine connection? As they stepped into the night, his resolve began to solidify. Would he seize this chance to rewrite his narrative, or cling to the shadows that had held him back for far too long? The moment of truth was approaching, and even though a part of him trembled, another part was ready for the leap ahead. The cool night air brushed against Ethan's skin as he stepped outside, the city lights flickering in the distance like tiny stars trapped on Earth. It was a stark contrast to the stuffy atmosphere inside, and he welcomed the change. But with Mia beside him, the tension stirred within him was palpable. He could feel every heartbeat echoing in his ears, a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Mia leaned next to him, casually resting her elbow against the cool metal railing of the patio. Her presence felt steadying, yet it ignited a fire of unanswered questions and self-reflections coursing through him. How was it that she could inspire feelings of authenticity so effortlessly? He felt out of place, struggling between the comfortable facade he'd built and the layers of insecurity that lay just beneath. "Thank you for stepping out with me," he managed, his voice laced with an uneasiness he couldn't quite mask. "I just needed something different." Mia turned towards him, her eyes curious and warm. "It's no trouble at all. I'm glad you did. Sometimes a little fresh air can clear the mind." In that moment, Ethan longed to spill every thought, every worry that gnawed at him. But that lingering self-doubt was like a tightrope he couldn't fully walk. As he wrestled with the impulse to reveal more, Mia broke the silence. "What's your story, Ethan? I feel like there's a lot more beneath the surface." Her inquiry jolted him. Did she truly want to know? The thought radiated both hope and dread. Ethan hesitated, the weight of his past pressing in on him. Would she understand how he'd allowed defeat to creep into his life? Or would she see him as a pathetic figure seeking pity? "Mine's not exactly riveting," he said with a hollow laugh, trying to downplay his journey. "Just the typical rise and fall of a tech entrepreneur." "Typical isn't the point," she replied, her voice piercing through his self-deprecation. "What matters is how you felt through it all, the challenges you faced." She was right. Deep within him, memories of sleepless nights and relentless pressure echoed back to when he ruled the tech world. Back then, he thrived on success. The accolades had been intoxicating, until the accident shattered not just his spine, but his entire identity. With great effort, he began to unveil his fine veil of bravado. "I traded happiness for ambition. Losing everything opened my eyes, but it also left me lost." Mia's expression shifted to one of compassion. "You're not defined by your past mistakes. You have the power to redefine yourself, to start again." The conviction in her words stirred something deep within him. He realized she didn't just talk the talk, she believed it. He felt a flicker of resolve begin to take root. "It's just a bit overwhelming," he admitted, his voice softer now. "I want to reframe my life, but getting rid of old expectations, it terrifies me. I'm scared of failing again." "Risk is part of growth," she said, her gaze uncompromising. "What if you reframed failure as a necessary step towards discovering your true path? Think of it as practice, building your own foundation." The metaphor nestled itself in his mind. Perhaps failing wasn't a finish line but a lesson in disguise. Slowly he began to understand that he had spent too long viewing his challenges through a lens of defeat. Each setback was a stroke of paint on the canvas of his journey. They had shaped him but didn't have to contain him. "What if I told you," he said, emboldened, "that I want to help others who've faced similar challenges. I want to create something that empowers them." "That's a fantastic idea," Mia said, her enthusiasm palpable. "There's definitely a need for that. You've experienced the dark side, and you have the capability to shine a light for others." He could hardly believe it. A genuine perspective shift. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a swell of hope. But with this realization came new fears. How would he validate this desire? What would his next steps be? "Maybe I can start a project or community," he mused aloud, feeling exhilarated by the evolving vision. But the echoes of doubt still lingered. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" Mia smiled, and this time it felt different, like a shared understanding. "You won't know unless you try. Besides, you won't be alone. I'm sure there are people who will want to support you." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. His desire was blossoming with potential, but so was his uncertainty. Before he could respond, the sound of raised voices erupted from the venue. A confrontation was brewing inside, an unsettling reminder that life thrummed with its chaotic realities, no matter the clarity found outside. It diverted their attention, pulling them back into the world they had briefly escaped. Ethan's heart raced. How easily could he slip back into old patterns of avoidance? Would he choose to engage or retreat? This was a moment where he could assert his newfound resolve. He looked at Mia, whose encouraging expression beckoned him to rise to the challenge. As the commotion swelled, he inhaled deeply, steeling himself for what lay ahead. It was time to confront not just the external noise but also the internal dialogue that had held him captive for too long. What was he willing to unleash from within? And would he take the risk of stepping fully into the light or once again retreat into the comfort of shadows? Ethan made a decision. "Let's go back in," he said, voice firm. "I want to face whatever this is together." As they turned towards the entrance, both the past and future loomed in balance. He was ready to challenge his fears head-on, leaving only one question hanging in the air. Was he prepared for the revelations that awaited him inside? Ethan stepped through the entrance, every sense heightened. The raucous shouts felt like a storm whipping through the contained space of the venue. He could feel the pulse of adrenaline as he navigated the chaotic atmosphere with Mia at his side. This was no longer just about confronting the noise around him. It was also about redefining himself in a world filled with chaos. As they reached the interior, the scene before them unfolded like a fraying tapestry. Two men stood at the center, voices raised in an escalating argument over a business deal gone sour. Ethan paused, feeling the familiar clutch of anxiety squeezing at his stomach. This was the explosive environment he had escaped, a realm where confidence became currency, and the fear of exposure loomed large. The fractured pieces of his past surged forward, and for a brief moment he hesitated, questioning his resolve. Mia nudged him gently. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice low amidst the ruckus. Her proximity was grounding, a reminder of the potential for connection beyond the superficial layers that often dominated these spaces. "Yeah," he replied, though doubt tinted his words. Taking a steadying breath, he focused his gaze on the altercation. Suddenly, it wasn't just their shouting that struck him. It was the realization that he had once thrived in such an environment. That was who he was, a once powerful player in a game where everyone fought to be heard. But the echoes of that past began clashing with his newly adopted narrative. He wanted more than mere survival. Without a plan, and perhaps fueled by the ember of inspiration Mia ignited, he stepped toward the commotion. He couldn't hide behind the barriers he had constructed any longer. He needed to confront not only the chaos outside, but the chaos within. "Hey!" he shouted, trying to make his voice cut through the noise. The heads turned. The two men instantly froze, caught between shout and silence, confused by the unexpected interruption. A rush of vulnerability flooded through him, but as he met their eyes, he felt an unusual surge of courage. "I understand there's some disagreement here," he continued, his tone now steadier. "But can we find a way to talk this through without escalating it further?" Both men blinked, momentarily taken aback by the sudden intrusion. The tension in the air shifted. There was a flicker of uncertainty before one man crossed his arms defiantly. "And who are you to say that?" Ethan felt the challenge like a slap. Every deflection of his past resurfaced in that instant. He grappled with an urge to retreat, to slip back into the shadows where he felt safe. But there was no room for that now. Faced with their interrogation, he forced the words out despite their sharpness. "Just someone who has been brought low and knows the cost of letting anger lead. Perhaps we can work through this without anyone else getting hurt." A hush fell over the area. A risk, but it was also a small victory for him. Self-doubt dissipated under the pressure of the moment. They needed guidance, and it dawned on him that he had something to offer. Mia stood by him, her expression brimming with support, and for the first time in a long while he was no longer afraid to pull from his experiences. He spoke about teamwork, about patience, about recognizing that at the heart of every conflict lay a missed connection. Perhaps he wasn't merely a spectator in this high-stakes arena. Maybe he could help navigate a clearer path forward. As the dialogue shifted, slowly the tension ebbed away. The two men began to lower their voices, and Ethan carefully reframed the situation in a manner that appealed to common interest rather than ego. When the situation finally resolved, with handshakes and understanding replacing hostility, a quiet cheer began building among onlookers. There it was, the rush of exhilaration coursing through him, empowerment in sharing a space of conflict and turning it into clarity. As they stepped away, Mia turned to him, eyes shining with admiration. "I can't believe you just did that." "I didn't plan for it," Ethan admitted, his breath heaving slightly. "But I couldn't stand by and watch. It felt Necessary. It was necessary, she agreed, excitement lacing her words. You have such a unique ability to forge connections. Perhaps that's exactly how you can help others. But as their conversation drifted back to those thoughts of his potential, a knot of anxiety returned. Ethan's mind latched onto the idea that if he was capable of this, could he truly embrace a greater mission? Was he prepared to face the deeper implications of his ambitions? Maybe I'm onto something, he mused aloud, uncertainty mingling with hope. But can I genuinely sustain this? What if I falter? Mia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You've already taken the first step, Ethan. You've conquered your fears tonight. Imagine what else you can do. A spark ignited within Ethan, yet it was countered by the weight of the unknown. He had stepped out of the shadows, but could he stay in that light long enough to uncover the truth of his own capabilities? The evening had shifted something inside him. The raw potential that lay ahead now felt both terrifying and tantalizing. As they walked back into the thrumming heart of the venue, the atmosphere buzzed with the promise of transformation. And in that pulsing chaos, he felt the edges of possibility beckoning him. What was he truly willing to sacrifice to reach the vision he had stumbled upon? It was time to dig deeper. The foundational truths awaited, along with the realities of what it meant to embrace authenticity in a world that demanded polish. But with every step the pulse of determination echoed. Perhaps this journey would lead him to the uncharted territories of his own identity. The inner battle wasn't over, and what revelations lay next in the shadows loomed ominously ahead. Would he dare face them? The vibrant chaos of the venue began to morph into a kaleidoscope of thoughts swirling in Ethan's mind. As applause faded and conversations resumed, he found himself grappling with the weight of what had just occurred. Mia's words lingered in the air, a soft reminder of the untapped potential he hardly recognized in himself. The surge of adrenaline mingled with fresh trepidation. What lay on the other side of this initial breakthrough? Ethan, are you ready to dive into this? Mia's voice broke through his reverie, pulling him from the depths of his contemplation. She leaned in closer, her eyes scrutinizing his expression with earnestness. I thought I was, he replied slowly, a frown creasing his brow. But now I'm not sure if I can keep this up. Why wouldn't you? She challenged, her determination igniting something within him. You stepped forward when it counted. You can have a real impact. Ethan's heart raced as he considered the implications of her words. What if he turned this newfound ability into something more than a fleeting driver of adrenaline? The void of self-doubt loomed, a space he hated to explore. Yet after his confrontations tonight, it seemed worth the journey. He had taken that vital step into the fray, but could he sustain the momentum? Maybe I need to practice more, he mused, more to himself than to Mia. I have to learn how to navigate this. People like those two men are everywhere. Practice, she echoed, a teasing smile growing on her lips. I think you might be underestimating yourself. You don't have to be overtly confrontational. This ability to connect, to listen, it's what counts. Use it. Use it. Something deep within him nodded. Perhaps that was what he could harness, a way to draw strength from both his history and his blossoming capability. He envisioned a life where conflict could be transformed into understanding, where the remnants of his past were woven into something greater, a patchwork of personal resilience. As they moved further into the crowd, their shared energy intensified. Each interaction around him floated by like echoes of encouragement, a man admitting failure, or a woman forging ahead despite setbacks. Ethan realized that every person in this space battled their own chaos, yet among them lay the essence of collaboration he craved, an idea ignited within him. What if I start helping people, not just in moments of crisis but in their daily struggles? I've been there, right? I know the sting of failure and the heaviness of self-doubt. Now you're talking, Mia exclaimed, her enthusiasm cutting through his lingering uncertainty. You could organize small workshops or one-on-one sessions, build from what you know, and help others navigate their own battles. The clarity of her suggestion resonated deeply, igniting a series of images in his mind. Intimate discussions over coffee, days spent in thoughtful planning, the power of shared experiences resonating in a supportive environment. But then, like a dark cloud, doubt settled in again. Could he truly carry this through? What if the fear of inadequacy returned? What if, when faced with new challenges, he fell short? "Ethan, what's that expression? Just because you stumbled doesn't mean you're not moving forward," Mia said, her voice steady and welcoming. "You already have your first small victory. Use that as your foundation." Her words were like a balm on his racing thoughts. Perhaps that was the essence of this journey, accepting imperfections while aspiring toward growth. The chaotic patterns of his fears began to resolve into a tapestry of determination, where each thread was stitched by moments of vulnerability, transformed into connections. "What's your plan?" Mia interrupted his contemplation, her gaze fixed on him with the kind of anticipation that felt propulsive. "I think I want to sketch out a concept, a framework of how to approach this," Ethan answered, elation bubbling within him. "I'll work from there. Each interaction will be a lesson." "Now we're getting somewhere," she smiled, her confidence in him propelling him further. As they left the venue, Ethan felt the echo of his past intertwining with the dawn of his future. A palpable sense of ambition unfolded within his chest, pushing back the shadows of self-doubt. The journey ahead felt daunting, each step a promise of what could be, but also a reminder of what had been. An unease lingered. He would undoubtedly face moments that tested his resolve. The narrative of his transformation was just beginning, and the focus had to shift from fear to earnest exploration of self. As they walked side by side, whispering potential ideas, Ethan realized a new urgency burned within. The path wasn't solely about helping others. It was about discovering who he could become, a bridge between chaos and understanding. Yet, shadows of uncertainty loomed, blending with anticipation. What facets of his character would he unearth on this path forward? Would he be steadfast enough to embrace the challenges that awaited? Or would the specter of inadequacy continue to follow him through every interaction? Ethan's mind whirred with possibilities as he began to map out a plan. He had never considered himself a teacher or a guide, but the notion that he could cultivate a space for others to share their struggles ignited a flicker of excitement within him. What if he could create an atmosphere where vulnerability became strength, where failures were stepping stones to success? As they strolled beneath the kaleidoscope of city lights, Mia's enthusiasm infused the air with warmth. "Let's start brainstorming topics," she urged, her eyes gleaming with inspiration. "You have stories that can resonate. What did you wish you had when you were feeling lost?" Ethan pondered the question deeply. I think it's about understanding that everyone has setbacks," he replied instinctively. "Perhaps I could structure the workshops around themes of resilience, ways to navigate both personal and professional challenges. Draw from my journey, share the real vulnerable moments." "Yes, that's perfect," Mia encouraged, her voice a buoyant force against the rising tide of uncertainty. "And remember, it's not about being perfect yourself, it's about being relatable." The thought of sharing his experiences both thrilled and unnerved him. Would people even listen to him? Would they see him as just another lost soul attempting to guide others? He could feel the gnawing doubt inching its way back into his consciousness, whispering that he might not be enough. "Ethan," Mia's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts, "don't let that doubt creep back in. You already know what it feels like to be in the depths of struggle. You have insights that can help others avoid those pitfalls. Focus on that." He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the flood of self-criticism that threatened to consume him. Resolving to combat those fears, he began to outline scenarios he could share. Facing rejection, coping with failure in relationships, transitioning through different phases of life. Each experience illuminated his path, and building on those moments felt like stitching together a lifeline he could extend to others. "I'll keep a journal," Ethan declared, shifting his focus. "Every time I feel triggered by self-doubt or narratives that surface from my past, I'll jot it down. I can reflect on those moments and how I overcame them." "That's brilliant," Mia affirmed, the energy between them crackling with potential. And when you present those insights, think about establishing key takeaways, something tangible for people to walk away with. The more Ethan thought about the framework, the clearer his vision became. Each hesitation he faced could be transformed into a lesson, an opportunity to connect with others who shared similar journeys. There were challenges ahead, undeniably, but for the first time he felt equipped to navigate them with intention. Eager to put his thoughts into action, he found a quiet space in his mind where solutions emerged. Yet just as hope unfolded, a foreboding whisper curled around him. What if past insecurities were not entirely behind him? What if some moments were too raw, too unprocessed to share? "What's bothering you?" Mia asked suddenly, her perceptive gaze catching the shift in his energy. He sighed, feeling exposed. "What if I can't talk about the deep stuff? I mean, really get into it without falling apart myself?" Mia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, authenticity is potent. Transparency builds trust. The more genuine you can be, the more impact you'll have. It's okay to show that you're still a work in progress." The tension in his chest eased slightly. Mia's support was a lifeline he hadn't realized he needed. He began to perceive a dual journey, one alongside those he would aim to help, and another tracing back to his own buried fears. "Okay," he said slowly, determination overtaking doubt. "Let's make a list of topics tonight. I'll sketch out my framework and consider what personal stories to include." As they settled into a nearby cafe and the buzz of conversation enveloped them, Ethan's heart raced with exhilaration. The road ahead was filled with possibility, but the specter of vulnerability loomed larger, a reminder of his unfinished internal work. Each idea exchanged was a step toward an upcoming workshop, a blueprint born from shared humanity. Yet nagging questions lingered. Could he be the teacher he aspired to be? Would he emerge unscathed when revisiting his past in front of others? The familiar weight of apprehension crept back into his thoughts. What if revealing his struggles opened old wounds? Would he have the strength to face them again? As Ethan sipped his coffee, the challenges took shape, merging excitement with apprehension. The moment he decided to act was the moment he embraced the truth. Personal growth would never be linear. Could he rise to meet the hurdles and embrace new vulnerabilities on this journey to self-discovery? Ethan's heart raced as he scribbled down topics in the dim cafe light. The promise of a new horizon flickered like embers in the pit of his stomach, igniting hope and fear in equal measure. Each word he wrote felt like an act of defiance against the swirling doubts attempting to ensnare him. "First up," he murmured to himself, "the struggle with self-acceptance." The ghost of his past whispered reminders of isolated nights spent wrestling with self-loathing. Was he ready to lay bare the ugly truths? He had wielded those memories like shields for far too long. Now he imagined transforming them into lighthouses guiding others away from perilous shores. Next, dealing with failure, he continued, his pen scratching against the paper. What does it mean to fail, really? To pivot from disappointment toward growth? He envisioned opening up about losing a job, the sky falling upon him as he faced an uncertain future. Every failure, every setback was part of the tapestry he planned to share. Yet the thought of revisiting those moments felt like walking into a dark room, a hand reaching out to switch on the light, uncertain of what the illumination would reveal. Mia leaned forward, her enthusiasm spilling over. "These themes resonate, Ethan. You're onto something real." He nodded, gritting his teeth against the inherent vulnerability of sharing his truth. If he intended to take the stage, then every word would hold weight. But would he have the strength to withstand the repercussions? "You mentioned you want your audience to engage," Mia pressed. "What if you incorporate interactive elements like breakout discussions? Allow them to reflect on their own experiences in real time." Ethan's mind buzzed with ideas. Engaging others in conversation wasn't just about sharing his struggles. It was about creating a platform where they could express their fears too. Yet, as he formed the vision of an embracing circle, he faltered. Unspoken stories lurking within his own heart cast shadows over his ambition. "What if they share something that triggers me?" he questioned aloud, flinching at the thought of vulnerability, the fleeting image of that darkness curling around his heart again. They'd trust you more if they witness your struggle, but also your courage to rise from it, she countered firmly. Think about it, Ethan. You'd be giving them permission to be vulnerable too, and therein lay his dilemma. The deeper he plunged into authenticity, the higher the stakes climbed. He wasn't merely curating an event, he was opening a door to emotional landscapes he had fortified for so long. Was it worth the risk of unearthing buried traumas? Lost in thought, he stared at the window where city life unfolded under the veil of night. He saw people strolling, laughter ringing in the air, each figure a reminder of connection he yearned for yet intrinsically feared. Inside, his voice whispered, what if stepping into this unknown led to the freedom he craved? Mia, he shifted back to their conversation. What if I truly dive deep? What if this journey transforms not just them, but also me? Mia beamed as if watching a doorknob turn. Exactly. Sharing is also healing. The healing starts with facing your past, surrendering to the flow. Ethan's fingers hovered over his journal, poised to write down the notion of healing versus hiding. Could courage materialize from the very wounds he feared? He couldn't shake the premonition that true growth awaited precisely where the fears resided. He turned back to Mia, resolve solidifying. I want to create not just workshops but a movement, one where raw, honest connection becomes the norm. Mia's eyes widened with excitement. This is big, Ethan. You're going from personal to communal growth. But you'll have to prepare yourself. Not everyone will be kind. He swallowed hard, the weight of impending confrontation hovering above him. What lay ahead? Uncertainty? Judgment? The bittersweet aftertaste of retrospection? As the evening deepened, Ethan continued to map out his framework, each point layered with hope and trepidation. Would raw vulnerability transform him into the very guide he wished to become, or would old wounds bleed anew? In the shadows of doubt, a new question flickered. How would he forge his narrative through the lens of experiences that once threatened to consume him entirely? The outline of his first workshop surged forward, yet so did the uncharted territory of self-discovery. The next step loomed on the horizon, and as he gathered courage, he knew that a confrontation awaited him. Would he emerge stronger, or would the truth fracture him irrevocably? With that uncertainty looming, he couldn't shake the realization. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and he had to be ready. Ethan woke to the hum of the city filtering through his window, an echo of yesterday's revelation still swirling in his mind. The daylight spilled like a soft embrace into his apartment, illuminating the room but casting long shadows of doubt in his heart. Today felt transformative, yet he struggled to shake the tension that gripped him, not merely out of fear but out of an acute awareness of the profound shift confronting him. He resolved to treat this day as a rehearsal for the larger performance he was preparing, one where he would not only share his own struggles, but also invite others to lay their truths bare. He sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by half-finished projects and books filled with notes on vulnerability, and he could almost feel the weight of self-imposed expectations pressing down on him like an anchor. As he picked up his pen again, he was acutely aware of the irony of writing about courage while simultaneously feeling so fragile. What was the best way to articulate his narrative without succumbing to the very fear that had shackled him in the past? Each stroke of the pen was accompanied by a new burst of apprehension, the thought of past failures whispering through his mind. A part of him longed to explore those failures openly, yet another part recoiled at the thought of baring his soul. His phone buzzed on the desk, jolting him from his thoughts. It was Mia. Ready to revise that outline, or are you still lost in your own head? He chuckled softly, appreciating her straightforwardness. Right. I'm focusing too much on the outcome instead of the process. He quickly responded to her message, determined to make this day productive. But the tension hum remained, an ever-present reminder that he was grappling not just with his fears, but with the weight of others' expectations as well. He decided to meet Mia at their usual cafe, the one filled with the sweet aroma of roasted coffee and the soothing sounds of clinking cups. Gathering his materials, notes, ideas, even the sketch of a potential itinerary for the workshop, He felt the momentum beginning to shift. Arriving at the cafe, he found Mia already settled in a corner with a steaming cup. "You look ready to tackle the world," she greeted, her smile infectious. The warmth she radiated made him feel lighter already. "Or dance around it," Ethan replied, sliding into the seat across from her. He laid out his notes, feeling the transparency of those pages. The revelations would not simply be about him. They would initiate a dialogue. "Okay, let's get to it," Mia urged, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "What did you decide on for the workshop title?" Ethan hesitated. Titles bore tremendous weight. They were the first gateways to the experiences he aimed to share. "What about embracing our imperfections?" he suggested, the words tasting fresh on his tongue. "Perfect," Mia exclaimed, but her smile faltered slightly. "But you know this also means you'll have to confront your imperfections head-on, right?" He nodded slowly, the truth settling heavily within him. "I realize that. It's terrifying. I have to be prepared for how others' stories might resonate with mine. What if they trigger my own wounds? True connection thrives in shared vulnerability. You can't control their reactions, but you can show them how to be brave," Mia replied with unwavering conviction. "You're not alone in this. You've got your own past to guide you." Ethan's apprehension collided with the prospect of hope. He could share not just the shadow of his past, but the light that had emerged through it. "What if I lead with my fears instead of my appeal?" he mused, considering how illuminating his journey could be. Mia leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "That might be exactly what people need. Show them the ugly bits, and how you've begun to piece your life back together." With every sentence, he could feel the contours of his framework solidifying. The realization that his journey could be mirrored in the struggles of others. Each shared moment could forge connections, discovering strength among vulnerabilities. But with that thought came an unsettling realization. This was not merely an exercise, it was an invitation to risk exposure. Ethan exhaled, a mix of determination and uncertainty weaving through him. What lay ahead would be a true test, not just of his resolve, but of his very identity. As the conversation flowed into practical planning, he knew in his gut that this was only the beginning. Each element of the workshop would require him to revisit not just the past, but also the person he had become in the interim. But as the sun dipped outside, casting vibrant hues against the skyline, a deeper question creased his brow. Would the very act of sharing his truth cost him more than he was prepared to lose? He didn't have the answer yet, but soon, he would have to confront the stirring winds of his past, standing ready to face whatever truths awaited him. Ethan awoke the following morning with a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him, as if the dawn itself had conspired to rekindle the flame of determination. Yet, the spark of enthusiasm was tempered by the weighty expectations that loomed over him like thunderclouds on the horizon. He slipped from beneath the covers, each movement a physical manifestation of his longing to transcend the limits he had always imposed upon himself. After a quick shower, the mirror offered a familiar reflection, eyes still carrying remnants of uncertainty, but the corners of his mouth hinted at something bold. Today, as he faced himself and the world, he intended to carve a path through the fog of fear and apprehension that had lingered for far too long. The cafe, once a comfortable retreat filled with coffee aromas and intellectual exchanges, now felt like a crucible. As he entered, familiar faces swirled around him, each immersed in their own routines. He settled at a table across from Mia, who was deep in discussion with another colleague. She looked up, her eyes lighting up as she saw him. "You ready to dive deeper?" Mia inquired, her tone buzzing with energy that seemed to slice through his lingering doubts. "Ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, trying to gauge the level of authenticity in his own voice. He could feel the tremor of his heartbeat echoing in his ears, even as he voiced the declaration. Mia wasted no time. "What's the first story you're planning to share?" He had mulled over this question since their last meeting. However, the rehearsed answers swirled in his mind like scattered leaves. The rawness he felt in his chest nudged him, whispering for a choice that felt exposed, yet liberating. Finally, he leaned in closer, speaking lower for her ears alone. I think it'll be about the time I faced failure in my last job. Mia's eyes widened as she leaned in. That's a good one. It shows your vulnerability and the lessons you learned. Ethan's throat tightened at the thought of standing before an audience, recounting his struggle with a lost project that had once defined his ambitions. Would they see his missteps as courage or mere ineptitude? His instincts pushed back, urging him to confine those memories to the shadows. Do you think it's too personal? He asked, wrestling with self-doubt. The pressure of authenticity felt almost suffocating. Personal is powerful, she said firmly. People connect with what's real. If you share what you've learned, they'll feel seen. Ethan watched her face for any hint of condescension, but all he saw was genuine belief. It ignited a flicker of bravery within. She was right. This wasn't just about him. It was about creating a safe space for others. Yet, the internal struggle was palpable, a tightrope walk between being exposed and empowered. After their meeting, Ethan found himself cycling through his mind's labyrinth as he headed home. The city zipped by, a blur of life as he wrestled with new concepts. How could he transform vulnerability into a bridge for connection? This was more than a workshop. It was potentially the beginning of his transition into a more authentic self. Days passed in this vein, each encounter and every word he penned reshaping his perspective. He attended a small lecture on storytelling, where he listened closely as accomplished speakers revealed their own miscalculations and the strength they found in their narratives. The inspiration sparked something profound within him. Each mistake was merely a thread in the tapestry of growth, yet there remained gnawing fears. What if sharing these stories reveals aspects of him he wasn't ready to confront? What if the audience's reactions turned against him? With each thought, the inner conflict intensified, alternating between the desire for connection and the instinct for self-preservation. As the date for the workshop drew near, Ethan found himself standing before his mirror performing his speech. An unfamiliar sensation arose. A sense of empowerment began to interlace with the trepidation. The walls of his self-constructed prison were slowly crumbling, revealing glimmers of light. Yet he understood that for every moment of courage there existed the potential for vulnerability's harsh consequences. You'll find strength in the telling, Ethan, he murmured to himself. But the notion felt precarious, dangling on the edge of something yet unseen. The night before the workshop, he stared at the jumble of notes and emotions swirling before him. It would be his moment to break away from the confines of fear. But what he didn't know yet was just how deeply this journey might unravel him. As Ethan drifted to sleep, the weight of anticipation pressed on him. A battle not just against vulnerability, but a confrontation of his deepest insecurities. He was ready for this next step, yet doubt coiled tight within his stomach. The dawn of the workshop awaited him, a stage that promised both revelation and discovery. Would revealing his truth pave the path for others, or would it crumble beneath the weight of scrutiny? As he closed his eyes, the question lingered, unyielding. Could he truly brave the exposure to set himself free? Ethan awoke to the early glow of sunrise, a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension flooding his senses. Today marked a pivotal transformation. His inaugural workshop, Embracing Our Imperfections, awaited him. The air buzzed with a mixture of hope and anxiety, urging him to fully engage with every moment that lay ahead. As he prepared himself, he affiliated each article of clothing he donned with a step deeper into his authentic self. The crisp shirt felt like a second skin, a manifestation of the courage he sought to embody. This was more than an event. It was the inaugural leap into a new chapter, one where he could conquer fears while empowering others to do the same. Arriving at the venue, he inhaled the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with the electric anticipation that filled the air. Mia was already there, her bright smile radiating reassurance. "You're going to be amazing," she encouraged, her enthusiasm like a warm embrace that fortified his wavering spirit. "Thanks," he replied, battling the familiar waves of self-doubt crashing over him. "But what if I falter?" "You won't. Remember, authenticity connects. Just share your experience and trust that your story matters," Mia reassured him, nodding confidently. Her unwavering belief acted as an anchor in the turbulent sea of his mind. As the attendees filtered in, Ethan felt his heart quicken. Every smile accounted for a bridge of connection and understanding waiting to be forged from shared vulnerabilities. He meticulously reviewed his notes one last time, allowing the collective energy to seep through him. This was no longer a solo venture. It was an intimate conversation inviting mutual exploration of the human experience. Once the workshop kicked off, he introduced himself, voice steadier than he anticipated. "Welcome to Embracing Our Imperfections. Today we'll navigate the challenges we face and discover the wisdom hidden within our failures." Watching the audience's engaged expressions ignited a spark within him, a recognition that his journey mattered, and so did theirs. Ethan shared his story, the rise and fall of his career, the crippling impact of his accident, followed by the journey through despair, leading to tentative hope. With each word, he sensed a sense of unity blossom in the room. People weren't just listeners. They were conduits of their own truths, sharing moments of struggle, hesitation, and resilience through discussions. The interaction was invigorating. Participants shared their challenges, unearthing the heavy emotions that had long since festered inside. Ethan facilitated dialogues about fear and aspiration, revealing that doubts are merely shadows of our past. He encouraged honesty, not just in identity, but in the recognition that failure is an integral part of the journey toward success. As he observed the collective vulnerabilities begin to merge, he felt a profound realization settle within him. The very act of sharing had transformed not only the participants' perspectives but his own. Their stories resonated deeply, and he was no longer the only bearer of burdens. They were all interconnected, weaving a tapestry of overcoming, where each thread represented growth, authenticity, and a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan introduced activities designed to streamline their reflections, fostering deeper conversations around self-acceptance and personal development. When participants engaged openly, each interaction emboldened him more. He was no longer standing before an audience. He was walking alongside them on a shared path of healing. When it came time to close, the emerging connections radiated throughout the room. Ethan took a moment to reflect on the journey he had traversed, the shadows of despair now illuminated with purpose. His eyes wandered to Mia, who beamed back at him with pride and encouragement. It was a reminder of how far he had come since that blind date. As he wrapped up, he instilled in everyone, "Remember, life will throw challenges your way. It's our response to these trials that will shape who we become. Embrace your imperfections, and know that you're never alone in this journey." The room erupted into applause, each clap resonating with validation. In that moment he felt a wave of pride wash over him, not just for the success of the workshop, but for the man he had finally allowed himself to be. Nourished by the experience, Ethan stepped outside after the event, the evening sky framed by the crimson glow of the sunset. Each breath he took filled him with more certainty, the lingering anxiety gradually fading away. He had confronted his fears and shared himself sincerely. He had proved to himself that he was indeed capable of making a positive impact, not just in his life, but in the lives of others. In the depths of his heart, Ethan felt an unshakable truth. Transformation isn't merely about escaping darkness, it's about forging connections and illuminating the paths others may be afraid to tread. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but the foundation he had built today felt like solid ground. Now he stepped firmly toward his future, poised to continue this journey of growth alongside those who dared to embrace their imperfections. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.